we're really trying to create an experience and a design that a guest feels totally compelled to pull out their phone, take a photo, take a video, almost like an autonomic response. They can't help themselves. So if we've created something like that, they will share it with their friends. They'll post about it. We'll get great user-generated content on top of all the content that we put out there. And that really is what we call shareability. Are we creating a product that is highly shareable, that makes people want to feel good about posting it on their page, referring friends to stay there, and just talking about how incredible and unique their experience was?
Nobody's born incredible. People who do incredible things simply took the right steps. This is our journey. This is the hunt for incredible. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Hunt for Incredible. On this episode, we have a cool guest because he is also in hospitality. He's made a big impact in hospitality and really changed the game in a lot of ways. We have my man, Ben Wolff. Ben Wolff is the co-founder of Onera. And for those who don't know of Onera, it is a micro resort near Fredericksburg, Texas, in Texas wine country. And what they did with that property in terms of the social media marketing and creating a unique experience was really impactful and catalyzed a lot of change for how people, at least people in Texas, and I think people in a lot of places, viewed micro resorts and experiential stays. So we're going to dive into that cool story. It's an upscale landscape hotel with a treehouse brand, so it's a really cool, unique vibe. Ben is also the co-founder of Owasi, which is a full-service growth firm. So they do marketing, social media management for hospitality and likely other, right? Or is it the big focus is it exclusive hospitality or is it other things too?
It's right now it's exclusively hospitality. We may be going into other sectors, but yeah, it's everything from landscape hotels, unique stays, glamping sites, all the way to, beautiful 4-star resorts on the California coast. We have a 130-room Hyatt Boundless Collection property outside San Diego that we also do marketing for. But it's also not just marketing. Marketing is a big piece of it, but we do full service management as well. And revenue management is a really big piece of what we do. We have a highly specialized team, and I think we have quite a bit of edge in that department as well. Guest experience, creating unique experiences, as you said, helping to renovate and redesign properties, add amenities that really speak to the needs and wants of the modern traveler. And we do ground up development. So it's a full service hospitality firm.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest things that caught my attention because our hotel that we're going to be doing renovations and the relaunch in March for, we're going to make a big social media push. And that's actually how we initially started talking, was using your social media company, using Owasi to do that, because you have tremendous experience in the space. And just to keep pushing it for listeners, we've been looking at a lot of different media agencies, and you are 100% up there at the top in terms of professionalism and experience and resume and everything else. But to keep layering on the expertise so that people know what they're getting themselves into at this episode is, Ben, you also exited into a public REIT with Onera, which is a super interesting process. So I'm familiar with REITs, but I'm really keen on understanding what an exit to a REIT looks like. So I'm not deeply familiar with that process. And they've since expanded. It's been a $14 million expansion on that property. And they also kicked off a second location in Wimberley. That was a $20 million project, which I've heard amazing things on. I've been following that one as well. So Ben, super stoked to have you on the show, and I'm excited to dive in with this one.
Excited to be here, Gideon. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so let's take a second to dive into that Onera property and what made it so powerful. Because I literally remember that property is a showstopper. Like, I remember doing market research on Airbnb and coming across that thumbnail. They're super interesting, like geometric shapes that are floating in the air. And it's absolutely like you stop scrolling and open that property, even if it doesn't totally fit what you're looking for, because there's such a draw there. So how are you and your partners thinking about that property when you were thinking through like the gravitas, even like marketing aside, but just thinking about the experience that you wanted to create for people?
Yeah, look, I think that I'm really driven to and passionate about creating experiences and properties and design that blow people away. And we've kind of articulated that now that we're sort of bigger on social media, and we do a lot of marketing direct to consumer and not on Airbnb and OTAs as much. We're really trying to create an experience and a design that a guest feels like totally compelled to pull out their phone, take a photo, take a video. It's almost like an autonomic response. They can't help themselves. And so if we've created something like that, then that'll be the result. And they will share it with their friends. They'll post about it. We'll get, great user generated content on top of all the content that we put out there. And that really is what we call shareability. Are we creating a product that is highly shareable, that makes people want to, feel good about posting it on their page, referring friends to stay there, and just talking about how incredible and unique their experience was?
What would you say are some of those elements that catalyze that shareability? Is it more just like, is it visually unique? Is it more the environment that the property is sitting in? Is it a combination of all of them? Like, what would you say if somebody is trying to design in their mind, they have a plot of land and they say, I'm going to put something here. What checklist should they be going through in terms of thinking of creating that shareability?
Yeah, so it certainly starts with your property, right? And what your property has to offer. That is your canvas that you are working with. And then you're going to be trying to put unique, interesting, inspiring unit types that really blend in seamlessly with the environment. That's what we've really tried to do at Onera Fredericksburg, and even more so at Onera Wimberley, our second location. So what does that property have to offer? Views are certain views, and that can be a long range hill country view, sort of dramatic elevation changes like we have at Wimberley, or it can be more of a wooded view, like enchanted forest type vibe, which is what we have at Onera Fredericksburg. And we have some other clients that are more in that vibe as well, that are, out close to the Smoky Mountains in much more of a wooded setting. That really works as well. It's more of an intimate sort of, outdoorsy type environment, not as quite of an awe-inspiring long view, but still creates this sense of privacy and just a window into nature. So I think the views are very important. Water features are also great. Obviously, if you're on a river, a lake, you can also enhance water features, right? So you can, take a lake, make it bigger. You can take a rock face and turn it into a water feature. You can create a waterfall or a stream with recirculating pumps and things like that. So it's great if it already has a water feature, but if there's areas of the site that can be enhanced and improved, then you can develop one. But guests love water. So whether that is, an existing river or lake or something like that, or it's a man-made even pool or plunge or hot tub or something like that, or more of a natural pool or grotto type feature, I think that's very important for travelers today. And then when you're thinking about how to incorporate design and like what unit types that you're going to ultimately put on the site itself and the key features of it really impact that quite a bit. So with Onera Wimberley, for example, we had a narrow hillside that had the most dramatic sort of overlooking views with the highest elevation change and sort of were the primo view spots. So we had to use a unit type that was going to be longer, skinnier. You could fit more units on the hillside to sort of optimize for that view. And that's ultimately what led us to choose the Spyglass, which is a long, skinny unit. The other benefit of that is there's a lot of grade change. So you walk in on one side of the Spyglass treehouse, and then you're basically at ground level. And on the backside, you might be 30, 35, 40 feet in the air with a hot tub suspended, feeling like you're kind of cantilevering and hanging off of this hillside overlooking the view. So it's like, how do we take what nature's already giving us and then amp it up and sort of seamlessly integrate the unit types and really have them accentuate what's already there?
Yeah, I love that. Dramatizing what that experience looks like so that people feel like a more extreme version while they're out there. Yeah, it's amazing too how drawn people are to staying in a place that looks unique, right? So it's almost like the visual uniqueness is what initially hooks them. And then once they're there, it's that experiential uniqueness that gets them raving about it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, look, simple things like a curved unit is unique, right? Whether that's a curved roof or, curved decking or some element of the property that has a curve. It's just not something you typically see in your traditional home or apartment or something like that. So I think that really draws people in. A circular space also, I think, is very cozy and feels really nice and different for somebody staying in the unit. Certainly, different roof pitches. We worked with that with Monarch, right? Where it's sort of the idea with the Monarch treehouse was sort of a take on a butterfly. So there's a double peaked roof. It looks like a sort of a modern, angular iteration of a butterfly. And it's the staircase is wrapped around a tree. So you have this really dramatic, cool moment where you're effectively walking up into the air and around a tree to get into your butterfly unit. So pushing the envelope, trying to do unique design elements that will pop on social, in a photo, in a video, and really draw people in to say, oh, what's that? I need to check that out.
Yeah. What did the capital raise look like for an asset like this? Because I've spoken to a buddy of mine is a mortgage broker. And so we were talking about this asset class. And of course, we're having a conversation around how difficult it can be to find financing for properties like this because there aren't a lot of comps in the area and things like that. So what did that journey look like and what was your approach?
So it wasn't easy, right? I mean, this was during COVID when we financed Onera Fredericksburg. So hospitality, there was still some question marks, right? People, when I first started looking for financing, people hadn't even really started traveling yet. There wasn't this like outdoor hospitality boom yet back in like April and May of 2020. So it just ended up talking to a lot of different banks, local community banks for the most part, people who knew the market, could sort of get behind and excited by the product and kind of bringing that to their local market. And ultimately, you just need one loan officer that believes in you as an operator, right? And believes in the concept and the market and wants to be a part of it, that will go to bat for you in loan committee and help kind of get things across the line and through underwriting. And that's what I found in Sonora Bank, this small local Texas bank, and the loan officer over there, this guy Josh, really helped push it through for us and help get comfortable. We had a good package to show him, right? There was some renderings and pretty pictures and layouts, and we had certainly done a pro forma and a model that looked really good on paper. And the other piece that certainly helped us as well was that I had an existing operating business. So I had a track record as a business operator and a profitable business operator with my short-term rental management company that I helped to scale before Onera. And we got that up to about 200 units. We had just under $1 million in NOI, or last year before COVID really upended things quite a bit. So being able to show that cash flow, show that income, and ultimately have that entity guarantor the debt really helped with our debt to income ratio and getting that secured.
Nice. Well, did you know, even as you were scaling your management company, that you wanted to transition into development and ownership? Or was that something that kind of you just stumbled upon?
So yes and no. I mean, we started to buy some homes, in 2019, smaller homes in sort of secondary markets like Louisville and Indianapolis. We started buying, typical short-term rental, vacation rental homes. And then when COVID hit and it just really upended the urban market, that's what pushed me to think outside the box a little more, and ultimately what led to Onera, doing more of an outdoor hospitality destination, nature focused eco resort, if you will. And there were other factors at play there too. Like me and my wife had just done a honeymoon around the southwestern US where we did RV life for 6 weeks and saw a dozen national parks over that period, and just got re-inspired by the great outdoors, not with all of the gaffes that come with RV life. So RVs breaking down, having to go to dealerships to get them fixed and like all that crap, but certainly waking up with these incredible sunrises, coming over a mesa or a canyon or a hoodoo or something like that certainly was inspiring and made me want to do something like this. So that was a component, and COVID was a component. And I think the other piece of it too, in terms of positioning Onera and the type of experience that we were going to create, it just seemed like there was this massive white space between like the under canvas and auto camps of the world, which I consider kind of a mid-tier outdoor hospitality experience, kind of a mass market appeal. And then the ultra luxury, Amangiris, Post Ranch Inns, these, incredible multi-$1,000 a night landscape hotel properties. But there wasn't a whole lot in the middle with really inspiring design, very unique unit types, very comfortable and luxurious finishes and amenities, but at a more approachable price point, maybe $500 a night to $1,000 or even upwards of $1,500. And that's where, I saw the sweet spot with Onera and like what I wanted as a consumer as well at that time. So yeah, that's what ultimately kind of pushed me down the path of what became Onera and those.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's definitely what intrigues me about landscape hotels in general also is I love the outdoors. My wife and I, we spent 6 months road tripping across the U.S., working remotely, visiting friends, family, and stopping by every national park we could along the way. And there were so many moments I'd be in a space that was so naturally impactful and moving and just think, man, so first of all, I don't want anybody else to discover this spot or it'll get swarmed. But then the second half is that would be cool to create experiences like this for other people. There were some spots we came across, like near Big Bend area, that there was nobody and it wasn't even a national park. And I was like, dude, you could totally throw like 15, 20 units out here and create amazing impact on people who are trying to escape, the hustle and bustle of everyday life and go to a place that's moving. And then that ends up being the offering and you're just blending in with that creativity of it, like the creativity involved or that's allowed in not just like this boutique micro resort space, but in landscape hotels specifically, I absolutely love.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it excites me. It's what kind of gets me up in the morning. So I love that stuff. And I feel you. Yeah, we had a trip planned to Big Bend to go to some of these types of unique hospitality properties in May of 2020. And it ended up getting canceled because of like how close to COVID and how many restrictions there still was and everything. But when you were out there, did you go to Terlingua, like the ghost town?
I did.
Kind of,
I was actually just about to comment that to you. Terlingua, I mean, I didn't see any, there might be some spots out there. I went like 6-7 years ago, so I didn't stop by any.
There are. I mean, that was very early to this kind of outdoor hospitality boon and unique stays. But yeah, there's Base Camp Terlingua out there, which is a brand that has a bunch of these kind of unique stays. There's another place called Summit Big Bend, which has these couple really cool cave homes and then a bunch of kind of, I would say mid-tier domes. But the property is stunning, amazing stargazing. So yeah, there's definitely some properties out there now. It's leveled up and changed a bit even since you've been.
That's awesome. Dude, yeah, Terlingua is a weird little spot. It is a weird little place, but like weird in all of the best ways. There was when we first showed up, so I didn't know anything about Terlingua. And my wife and I, we went there and we booked a spot. It was like a little glamping spot. We showed up and we got a message from the host for us to meet him inside this bar. So we go into the bar and we walk in and it's like old saloon vibes, kind of strange. There's somebody playing music up on the stage, but it's kind of like weird hippie music. There's a guy at the bar with like an eye patch. Like it literally looks like you feel like you're walking into a movie and you're like, this is not a real life. Like these are characters in a play. There was a guy there with like at the bar with like a scrunched up face and a peg leg. And I was just like, where on earth are we? And we walk in not knowing what the host was supposed to look like, but we know that we're supposed to meet him. And then over the microphone, we hear, hey, is there a Jackie here? My wife, Jackie, had booked it. And the guy who was on stage playing this quirky music was our host. And he was like, all right, I'm going to take a 10-minute break. He took a break and walked us around to the back to this glamping resort. And yeah, just like weird little quirky stuff like that, where it's like everybody is so warm and welcoming, but there's this strange draw to the place. And I think it's like what we're talking about. You go out there and it just feels like you're in another planet and captivated by this beauty. And I felt like everybody we talked to had the same story, which was, oh yeah, I was just passing through to play some shows and never left. And it was almost kind of like, I don't know, like the intro to a weird horror film where like nobody knows why they haven't left, but nobody's left yet. There's a strange draw to places like that. And I think, yeah, creating experiences like that or creating experiences in places like that is a powerful, powerful thing.
Yeah, totally. And I think you're speaking to like an authenticity and a genuineness and like a storyline component to a property that really draws you in and creates some intrigue and really, creates a great story and experience after the fact too.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So I want to hear more about the exiting to the public REITs. For those who, or actually, I'll let you give the rundown on what is a REIT, and then more interestingly to me is like, what does exiting to a REIT look like?
Yeah, so a REIT's a real estate investment trust. There are private REITs and there are public REITs. We actually sold to a public REIT, so they're publicly traded, and they are a $4 billion REIT. They asset manage hundreds of hotels, and most of their portfolio is actually limited service. So it's a lot of like, Hampton Garden Inns and Hotel Indigos and properties that are limited service, limited staff, and that was their model. And that's one of the reasons that they gravitated to and liked Onera, because we're also relatively limited staff compared to a full service, certainly like a luxury hotel and even like a typical 3 and 4 star hotel is going to have a lot more service than our Onera properties do. We heavily invested in the units themselves, in the design, in the amenities, that can be self-serve, like hot tubs and barrel saunas and things like that. But we are more efficient on the staffing side. So they liked that. I mean, they liked our insane, numbers that we were putting up, especially during COVID. So that was attractive to them. And effectively, they had a mandate from their board to get into more alternative hospitality. So they were looking at vacation rentals, like more typical communities of vacation rentals. They were looking at glamping, and they were looking at, properties like ours. And I think they saw in us that we were really trying to level up, do things the right way, be an upscale experience and a asset with kind of sustainable value long term and the ability to expand a brand. So we had Onera Fredericksburg up and running is like kind of a great proof of concept for them, I think, in a lot of ways. Like it's pretty small for a $4 billion REIT, but they saw it as a platform play, right? We have this one property, 8 units. We have line of sight to adding 3 more units on that same site, which we did. And then we also owned the lot next door. So we had an immediate expansion opportunity there. And then we had the 20 acres in Wimberley that we were pretty far along into planning and programming. And so they saw that vision and that kind of pitch as well. And ultimately for the Wimberley property, they actually just came in as a mezz lender and had an option to buy it. So it was a different structure. But for Fredericksburg, they bought us out at a cap rate. We had an earnout where, they paid us some money up front. And then we had a year to kind of prove ourselves and continue the success. And then we would get an earnout, based on that success. And thankfully we hit the max, we maxed out the earnout, which was great. And from there, we've been JV partners with them on the expansion. So to Fredericksburg. So that one was a true JV equity partnership because they owned Onera Fredericksburg in a JV with us. We stayed in 10%. They bought out 90%. And then we did a JV on the expansion to that property.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. And look, I mean, it takes a while to get a deal with a public REIT done, right? I mean, we were talking to them. It was either pre-open or like right when we opened. And then we opened Onera Fredericksburg in November of 21 and we got the deal done in October of 22. So It took almost a year to get the deal done. Yeah.
Wait, so you started having conversations before you even hosted your first guest or before the additional 3 that you said you got up and running?
No, I mean, it was right around the time that we opened that we started talking
nice.
to them. Yeah.
Wait, so what did that look like? Was that was your mindset of, okay, we can cash out early and continue development, or was it something else?
So look, I mean, I'll always take a meeting, right? I mean, I have investors. I mean, we have to look at every opportunity, and there was interest, from this group that was very well capitalized in the product that we were creating. And one of the reasons it took a year is because I didn't necessarily want to sell right away, right? It was like, hey, this is going well. Maybe we just continue it, refi. Ultimately, the reason that we did decide to sell is because they were going to help us achieve some bigger visions and ensure success on some of these other projects, right? They helped us get the senior debt financing for Onera Wimberley and provided some mezz debt for that project to make sure that it got off the ground and got financed. And that was a much bigger project than Onera Fredericksburg, north of 20 million, whereas Onera Fredericksburg was a fraction of that, the initial build. And then they would, be that JV partner to really help us expand Onera Fredericksburg and do some even more, cooler, upscale, inspiring new unit types on the expansion and really help fund that. So yeah, it was a way to, I would say, ensure success and growth and build up the brand a lot quicker than if we were trying to raise money and raise our own debt capital all on our own, especially during the interest rate crisis and a time when it wasn't necessarily easy to raise debt or equity.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then how did they hear about you? Were you already doing pre-launch marketing to develop the brand for a big launch, or was there some other connection there?
So they're based in just outside of Austin. So I think they knew the kind of broader market relatively well. I mean, we made a little bit of a splash upon open, just being such a unique, differentiated upscale offering in Fredericksburg that had very limited, nice hotel options, let alone these super cool, unique unit types. And then my partner knew the CFO that was new and incoming over there. So, a connection through, friendly connection through network led to a conversation that, a year later led to a deal.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now let's dip into the marketing side a bit more. And I have a handful of questions around this, and then I want to go deeper into Owasi's offering and how you think about marketing. How I know you built a personal brand in the meantime. You're big on LinkedIn. You put out a lot of really great content that everybody on here should follow along for. How did you think about building your personal brand coupled with the brand of the property, if at all?
Yeah, so the personal brand came after. I was really leaning into social media marketing for Onera for about a year plus before I really started doing anything with my personal brand. And it's funny, I was kind of reticent to put myself out there and to build a personal brand. I was kind of heads down, execution, certainly had a visionary side to me, right? But really like to build things and create things. And so I was not as drawn to being as out front and center and sort of talking about myself and things that I had done and all that. But my co-founder in Owasi, the services company that I started, really pushed me to do that. It was like, hey, we're in this era of founder led. You have to get out there. We have to add value, sort of teach people about this movement of innovating hospitality for the modern traveler and how we reach them through social media marketing, through inspiring, unique stays. And so that was kind of the push that I needed. And the other piece was seeing Isaac French, who I think you know as well, who actually had a smaller property, hadn't exited yet. And he was kind of blowing up on social media even a few months before I got started on it. And I was like, wow, like this guy's got a place a couple hours away. I think Onera is arguably even cooler. And we are, I think at that time had already exited, to a public REIT. And I think there's a story here for what we've done as well. We should try and emulate some of that and see if we can have some success. And it's been so worth it, right? I mean, the vast majority of our leads for Owasi come in through my personal brand and through the social media marketing we do for my personal brand. So newsletter, LinkedIn posts, Twitter posts, podcasts is a big one, like this. I think podcasts are great too, because it can be deceiving. I think the number of views that you'll see on a podcast and, there's obviously YouTube and then there's Spotify and Apple and sort of it's very well distributed. So it's sometimes even hard to tell exactly how many views there are across all platforms. But I'm always shocked at how podcasts kind of punch above their weight class, I think, in terms of actually driving leads and driving business. And I think part of that is somebody really feels like they get to know you when they've heard a half hour, an hour long podcast with you. There's a trust factor built that they hear about how you think about things. They hear about your actual experience, case studies effectively through storytelling. And it can compel them to reach out. So.
Yeah, no, it is powerful. And it's worth taking like a note there, because for anybody listening, the power of not just a personal brand, but I'll even lean into podcasts specifically, it's an absolute game changer. Because I've found that the people who listen to the episodes tend to be much more action oriented and engaged, and through the podcast, since it is longer form, have an opportunity to develop a closer and more like intimate connection, even if it is asynchronous, we'll say, because they're listening in their car, but we're talking right now. And it's like the relationship that can be built over this long form is so powerful. I actually had someone reach out to me who listened to my podcast, and they were like, hey, Gid, your episode with Dylan Wright, one of my best friends, he's a music manager up in Nashville, an artist manager. She said, your podcast episode with Dylan Wright changed my life. And it's the reason why I quit my job and made the leap to start my own company. And I mean, first of all, that level of responsibility to me, I was like, I hope everything works out for her, because I don't want to be the reason that, but like she said that it's doing well. She leapt into like starting her own accounting firm, and like it blew my mind, because you hear about these types of stories, but typically when you hear about them with these like massive podcasts that are like making this huge impact and whatever. And it's amazing how quickly you start seeing the return on the impact that you can make with people. So anybody listening to this, I know a lot of people, I do free coaching calls. And one of the leading things that I hear from people is, oh, I want to start a podcast. And when I ask why they're not, the excuses are never good, because podcasts are so easy to start that it's like, just hop on a Zoom call with somebody who's doing something you're interested in and record it for an hour and push it out. It's simple and straightforward. Anybody listening to this, take action, move forward. And the benefits that you find, like even Ben, like we've spoken multiple times, but this is really the first time we've gotten to dive into like your story and how you think about things. And it's so fruitful and such a beautiful thing. And it's such low hanging fruit that I think personally, I think nearly every single person should do it, whether they're trying to start a personal brand or not, especially people who don't want to do it, because that's a good growing opportunity that they need to dive into.
Definitely. And I think that there's also a sense of it forces you to clarify your thinking a little bit better because, through podcasts, I mean, I've found, and I don't have my own in that bucket of I'm going to start a podcast one day, but I haven't, but I've been on like 35 of them. So I'm sort of getting some of that benefit, right, of being on a podcast, having that out there, people hearing it and reaching out to me. And I'm kind of getting the distribution from a bunch of people that have their own followings. Someday I do want to start one. I'd love to do one. I actually talked about doing one with Isaac potentially, which I think would be really fun. So someday, but I think that being on podcasts has kind of helped me articulate better what the strategy is, what the story is. And that's great, not just in podcasting, but it's great in sales, right? It's great in trying to raise money. I mean, there's so many different ways how storytelling, communicating a vision is such a massive part of what a founder and really a CEO's job is.
I really like that. It's almost like writing or journaling, anything that forces you to add structure to your thoughts and reflect on your thoughts. Because I do the same thing. Like as I'm telling someone something, I'm like re-articulating it and re-adding structure. So I have a handful of one-liners. There have been a handful of podcasts that I've been on where people are like, holy shit, dude, that's so smooth. Like that one statement was really impactful. And I'm like, yeah, that's the 30th time I've said it because I've ironed it out. Oh, it's like slight iterations over the last 20 podcasts I've been on. And yeah, it does add structure and articulation and simplification of like taking a complex thought. And then each time you go over it or share it, you simplify it down until it's this digestible thing that people can actually use and take action on, which is a big motivator for me, is like hearing your story and giving people a blueprint on, hey, if you want to replicate something similar to what Ben Wolff did, or even take the lessons that Ben shares to apply it to, I don't know, starting a bakery or whatever it is, then like, here's the digestible, simplified model that you can take and apply to be successful in your own space.
100%. I think that there's also like, you get this feedback loop of the podcast, right? It's published, you get to hear yourself. The first couple are going to be cringy, right? I think the first podcast I did, I counted the amount of times I said, because I'm from the Northeast. So I probably said, 100 times. And so I consciously was like, I really got to cut that down. It's distracting or saying, right. Or something along those lines. So yeah, it's just great feedback in terms of speaking, communicating more clearly. And yeah, I think it really helps build an audience and build trust.
Yeah, definitely. So let's spend more time on Owasi and the how you think about marketing for properties. So if somebody has a property right now and they're thinking, okay, I want to hit social media hard. Two questions. One is, how important is a personal brand? Like if somebody says, okay, I've got $3,000 a month, I can either invest that $3,000 in building a personal brand, or I can invest that $3,000 on Meta ads or Google ads and still get a similar return. How should they be thinking of those two different options?
It definitely depends on the goals, right? For like your long-term career trajectory. And if you want to kind of go on to bigger and better things and have bigger opportunities, I think there's nothing better than the personal brand. But with that said, the success of your existing property, right? And investing money into that, the marketing for that is going to impact your story and your results that you can share on social. So unfortunately, like you have to do a little bit of both. And for us and for me, I think more so than a number of other people in the space, the branding and the social for Onera, for example, is pretty separate from my personal brand. Like I talk about Onera a ton on podcasts and on LinkedIn and my newsletter and on X, but you don't see me on the Onera Instagram. There's a number of reasons for that, right? Some of it's our ownership and, brand and the different stakeholders involved and all of that. But clearly there's a way to have success and not have to be founder out front and center on the actual Instagram for the property, but that can also work. I mean, look at Isaac, look at Bolt Farm Treehouse, the Bolts, the Cliffs at Hocking Hills. If you have that founder led component on the property and social media marketing, like for your hotel, I think that can be extremely impactful, but you don't have to do that. You can build your personal brand, and people still connect me with Onera. And I'm always surprised how many people like heard me on a podcast or saw a LinkedIn post and then actually decide to go out and stay at Onera because they want to experience it and they want to, it's
Wow,
really
cool.
interesting to see how it's like, I think of my personal brand as more B2B, but we actually get some consumer driven stays from that. Or they saw me on a Shelby Church video where I'm like breaking down the business and the development, but they're like, oh yeah, I saw you in this video. And we're like, we got to come stay and check this thing out. And it creates that connection to the founder, to the story of the property. So I do think all that stuff's valuable. But yeah, for $3,000 a month, I mean, you wouldn't quite hit Awasi's threshold, as you know, in terms of monthly spend. Typically we're working with clients that are in the at least $500,000 and ideally $1 million plus in annual revenue. And usually our base packages start closer to 5K. And really, I think that for social, it's relatively binary where you like have an account, you kind of tick the box and it's not driving a ton of actual value. It's not driving a ton of bookings. There's not a lot of growth, or you invest heavily in content, heavily in influencer marketing, and you really spend money there, right? You spend thousands of dollars on high-end videographers. You spend thousands of dollars on the best influencers that drive the highest ROI and have a targeted, engaged following. And those things can lead to 80% direct bookings, like what we've experienced at Onera and some of our other properties. Or you can tick the box, have an account. Okay, there's some credibility component to just having an account. But if you're going to spend less, then I think you have to learn more and really do more yourself. Like if you're going to try and spend that $3,000 a month, you're not going to be able to afford a management layer like Awasi, where we're kind of handling it all for you. And we have expertise that we can draw on and sort of, coordinate the whole thing, manage the account, the comments, produce the videos, send out the shooters, manage the influencers. You're going to have to do more of that yourself. So if you have time, if you're early, then save that $3,000 a month, like just to pay the influencer, save that $3,000 a month over 2 months to have a really great videographer come out for 4 or 5 days and shoot your property. And then, work with an offshore editor to help kind of chop it up. But there is going to be a longer learning curve. It's not going to be as fast to growth as if you want to, try and work with a firm or maybe an individual hire that has the capability out the gate.
Yeah, something to tease out there, and I say this all the time, but you just touched on it, is bigger is almost always easier. Like you can go small, be a $500,000 top line property and work on social media yourself. And then you're also going to be working on management yourself. And then you're also going to be working on XYZ yourself. But if you go bigger and you're hitting that plus over $1 million or even over probably over 1.5, 1.7 million, now your pie is big enough to where you can cut the pieces of the pie and give it out to rock stars, bring professionals in, people like Ben, who they have an experienced team that can really crush your property marketing. And then you still get a slice of the pie yourself just for bringing the people in and making sure everything is running smoothly. So just taking a step back in terms of fundamentals going into this is I would recommend don't try to do this yourself unless you're already in that situation where you need to. And if you have the opportunity, just think bigger, go for a bigger property that can afford to spend more on marketing, and then hire somebody like Ben to come in and execute on the marketing piece while you worry about, the higher level, making sure that everything's running smoothly. I do.
And just to comment on that, I think that's spot on. And I certainly get asked why bigger, me and Isaac actually had a podcast recently where he's focused on smaller, more curated maybe properties. And I'm sort of graduating into bigger properties. Like Onera Wimberley is 28 units. We're expanding Onera Fredericksburg to 35. And I had the same answer, which is I can get better talent and better people to run the show in various aspects and true specialists when I have a bigger budget to work with because the property generates more revenue, right? And it's a bigger project to build so I can get a better GC. And it allows me to focus on growth, to focus on new opportunities, to focus on communicating the vision in formats like this. And I can, I have plenty of the pie, as you said, to go around to hire those specialists and rock stars.
Yeah, 100%. So now I'm going to dive into a more strategic question around social media. So Instagram recently came out that they are going to mimic TikTok's model of showing reels on feed. So your follower count matters less. It's a matter of like, are you actually posting content that gains a lot of traction, which removes a lot of the snowball effect that used to happen before, where as you amassed a larger audience, it kind of snowballed into you'd naturally get more eyeballs per post. Are you shifting your strategy at all, or like rethinking about things with that in mind, knowing that, like we talked about, there's value in building a brand, even if it takes more time? Like, what does building that brand look like if we're not getting that same snowball effect that we were before?
So I think you still get some of the snowball effect first, but the second piece of it is it all comes down to how good your content is, right? Like that's effectively what Instagram and TikTok started with, right? Like the best content rises to the top regardless of how many followers you have. And I think it makes the platform better, right? Because you're not just seeing stuff from people that are bigger, you're seeing the best of the best content that other people felt was so good they were compelled to reshare it. Right. That's what creates virality. If you see something and you're like, this is so dope, I'm going to send it to my wife or my friend or my business partner, then if that happens enough, that's what kicks you into this viral loop, right? Where it just explodes. So I would still say that like the value is in how good your content is. So your expertise in storytelling, having the best videographers and best quality footage, in crafting hooks, in creating like tension in a reel so you can create more engagement, sort of pull people in and get them to stay throughout the entire video. All that becomes that much more important. So again, you can do it yourself, but if you don't have that expertise, there's going to be a relatively steep learning curve to getting really good at content. Now, with that said, I think content is just going to continue to get more and more important. And we've already seen that. The content creators are going to be the ones that win in this sort of new age economy. So I think it's an extremely valuable thing to get good at and to practice and test. But to get really good at it, you're going to need a lot of reps. And that's where, a group like we come in, or, you just got to put in the reps yourself.
Yeah. So Ben, we always wrap up the show with a question. I believe questions are the answer. So I want to ask you, what do you feel people need to ask themselves or ask of others to be successful in this space?
I think about it to some extent a little more broadly when it comes to like founding a company or, building a business, being an entrepreneur. And I think there's two pieces. Like, do you have a strong sense of urgency? And a strong sense of urgency time and time again has proven to win out sometimes against better ideas, even at the outset, or maybe even higher intelligence. But that higher sense of urgency, it compounds. So if I do more this week than you, and then next week, and then next week, right, that compounds on itself. And there's this like exponential curve that gets created. So I think a sense of urgency is huge. And then another piece of it, frankly, is just pain threshold. Like this stuff is hard. And so are you willing, to deal with these like multi-$100,000 mistakes in your first development that, you're going to have to figure out a way to get through and raise a bridge loan and figure out how to retrofit units to make them work when they weren't exactly what you thought it was going to be, right? Like, are you willing to suffer through the pain to get through the other side? And I think that to really build a bigger business, go after a bigger vision, you do have to have that pain threshold. I think there's some businesses, solopreneur, there's some, I think, content creation businesses today where you're a one-man show or a one-woman show or have maybe one VA that can be different than that. But if you're trying to build an organization with rock star team players and going after a really big vision, then you got to have pain threshold.
I love that. I've always communicated it as grit, but I'm going to start using pain threshold as the metric, because that you're 100% accurate. It's like, what are you able to tolerate? You will get crushed. There's no question about it. The question is, how much pain can you tolerate and still move forward? Well, Ben, thank you so much.
Can you grow and learn from that pain?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And
how do you respond to that pain?
Yeah, pain is the best teacher. Does it motivate you, right, to change and to level up, or does it kind of keep you kicked down and sort of giving up? I think that's separates those that ultimately succeed and those that kind of go back and get a job.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Well, Ben, this has been a real joy. Yeah, and once you wrap up these new developments, we'll have to have you back on so we can hear how it goes.
Yeah. Sounds good, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Take it easy.
Too.